Welcome back to the show, Indestructible Souls. Thank you. Happy Sunday. Thank you for joining me. Welcome back. Trying to remain consistent. A little tired, but we're going to make it happen. So today, I'm actually going to start a series on dispelling the myth of Black fatherlessness. We're going to talk about fatherhood. So before we get into that, so the topic in terms of fatherlessness in the Black community is near and dear to my heart. But we're going to break the myth about Black fathers in general. One of the things that we have, I guess the term would be perpetuated in the Black community, is that most of our kids are fatherless and that Black fathers are not involved and all of those good things. However, today I'm going to start a 4-part series on fatherhood, particularly Black fatherhood. And for some of you, any of you fathers out there who want to get in on the show, um, please send me a message. I would love to interview some dedicated fathers, particularly Black fathers, so we can talk about fatherhood in the Black family. But before we get there, there's a lot of things in the media. Particularly, we got an election coming up. Um, you know, in a few days, and I said it before and I'm going to say it again. Please get out and vote. I've already voted. Don't forget to vote on your local elections. That's where it really happens at. Yes, we all want to vote for the president, vice president, and all that good stuff, and, Congress and Senate. But we got to vote for our city councilmen. We got to vote for our judges, the sheriffs, at a more local level. And so those are the ones that affect us on a day-to-day basis. So we have to make sure that we are voting at a local level because that's going to affect our day-to-day lives, our communities, and that's where we're going to see the most change. So we want to make sure that we're voting. Um, so please get out and vote. If you haven't already did your early voting and voted by mail, please, please, please go vote in groups. Take someone with you. Do not let them deter you from voting. We're already seeing that they're trying to suppress the vote or from people from voting. Make sure you get out. When you go to the polls, please take someone with you. Go in pairs. And I have never in my lifetime seen a social climate like this. I would imagine it's pretty similar to the 50s and the 60s, but we'll get there. So please go out and vote. So I wanted to start this topic on fatherhood, particularly Black fatherhood, and so this is just a sort of introduction. And oftentimes, a lot of my topics are talking about what's wrong, not only with our young boys, what's wrong with our men, and the platform is for mental wellness for African American men and boys. So one of the things we have to talk about is not only fatherhood, but before we get there, there's some myths that we need to dispel, right? So we always getting on each other, but I have to blame us. And when I mean us, I mean the Black family or the Black community for pushing this narrative about absent Black fathers, or there's the term that seems to be synonymous with us is deadbeat dads. fathers, we always want to blame a kid's behavior, or for someone going to prison, we always want to blame it on fatherlessness. And I'm not saying that that's not. I'm not saying that that's not a factor, but what I am saying is, after today's topic, my hope is you see the value of fathers or Black fathers in a different light. And one of the things, and I bet you can ask anybody, and I bet you if you ask them, were most kids or most Black kids, if they had a father in the home, or sometimes even if they know their father and all that. And I guarantee you, most people that you have a conversation with will assume that the dad or the father is not in the home. Now, I don't want to get too technical. You guys know my show. There's, as being a therapist, one of the things we talk about, or we're taught, is we have to back everything up with data, raw data. We have to back things up with statistics and all of that stuff. I'm not going to run numbers down to you, but I am going to talk about, to start this series, I want to dispel some myths about the Black father. So just to kind of give you some context and some history. So I have two daughters. They're in their 20s now, 28 and 24. And the truth is the truth. So being a young father, and even before my first daughter, I always believed, because of my experience and my father being in and out of prison, was that the narrative was, or the truth was, that there was just not Black fathers in the home. And I'm gonna give us some historical context as well. However, so growing up, my father in and out of prison, drug addict and all those things, I did have a father figure. I've had a couple of father figures, but most importantly, Jack, who was my main father figure, who was my grandfather, by marriage, just to give it context, who basically helped raise us, get us into sports, make sure that, tried to teach us as much of manhood as possible, which is me growing up. And I've told the story before, was that the first time that I personally saw a two-parent home, an active father, was when I met the Jenkinses. Now, that's not to say and that there wasn't other two-parent families in the neighborhood. I'm talking intimately, meaning in their house, seeing them operate, seeing them interact. It was different. But keep in mind, in the neighborhood that I grew up in, there was a lot of fathers. And I can start naming off families. Just in my neighborhood, when, there was always fathers in the neighborhood. But we always got this rap that there wasn't fathers in the neighborhood. So growing up, and what I mean by that, we have to take blame for ourselves, is the fact that we have pushed this narrative that Black men do not want to raise kids. We've pushed that narrative, and oftentimes maybe it's out of bitterness and so forth. Now, let's take it back historically. So when we talk about systematic racism, and in the context of the family, from the moment we reached these shores through the Middle Passage, America systematically tore the Black family apart through slavery. Now, a lot of times people want to say slavery was a long time ago, get over it. Now, if it were only that simple. So systematically through racism, not only were we not allowed to get married, we weren't allowed to do a lot of things, and they ripped the family apart. So a lot of us traditionally, even when we get married now, what do? We jump the broom, because before, systematically and legally, we weren't even allowed to get married and things like that. Now, push a little forward, when we talk about the welfare system, people oftentimes want to basically want to think the welfare system is synonymous with minorities and particularly Black people. The true fact of the matter is that there's more white people on welfare than there is Black people or Hispanic. But when we talk about statistically and proportionally, then we're disproportionately represented. However, there's more white people on welfare than there is Black people. But here's what happened. In order, because they systematically took us out of society or hindered us from building wealth, getting jobs, getting education, getting proper housing, buying homes, and all those things, then here comes the welfare system. However, in order to qualify for welfare, the Black man could not be in the home. So you then begin to see the further deterioration of the Black family, particularly disenfranchising the Black father out of the family. But now let's get into the gist of the topic. So now that you have a little bit of historical context, in the sense that society, America, has systematically pushed the Black male out of the home, and we as a people, because of, you know, whether it's divorce, whether it's breaking up, whether it's having kids out of wedlock, whatever it may be, we have pushed this narrative that Black men are either not good fathers, we're absent fathers, and all of those things. So as I start this series, I think it is beneficial that we dispel the myth of Black fatherlessness, to give it a better context as we get into further topics. Now, needless to say, but I'll say it, that the Black father is not only key, but and very important to the well-being of kids and the kids that we raise. And here, let me say this real quick. I'm not talking just biological fathers. I'm talking biological. I'm talking someone, maybe stepdads. I'm talking other father figures, and father in the context of someone raising kids. Whether, and then also to give it further context, is fathers who are in the home and fathers who are outside of the home. One of the things that we see oftentimes in our community, and I know it happens in other communities, but I can only talk about mine, is that when the family breaks up, or if the family ever forms through marriage, one of the things we do is we see mother and father fighting over the kids, and the kids becoming weaponized against the father to keep the push the father out of the family. And it becomes about child support. It becomes about all these other things, and we leave the kids out and the kids suffer. But let me talk about the importance of the father. One of the things that we know is that having a positive, I hate saying positive, but having a father, one of the things that we know when we talk about overall well-being, is how a strong father in the home affects a child growing up and the outcome and their overall well-being. We're talking mentally, we're talking emotionally, we're talking socially, and all those things that fathers have a strong effect on. But now here's let's get to some numbers. One of the things that people want to believe is that most Black children are fatherless, and the facts and the numbers do not support that. When, and I'm not going to spew all the numbers, but keep in mind, the federal CDC Center for Disease Controls, yes, they do research and they keep data on families, family involvement, and all of those things. So when we talk about the Black family, there are more Black families with fathers than without fathers. So that's the first myth, because most of us would believe that there's more families without fathers than there are with fathers. The fact of the matter is that there are more Black families with a father present than there is with a father absent. But like I said, we would rather believe differently, and we've pushed that narrative. So that's the first myth that's already based off the numbers. And we're talking significantly more families that have fathers than that don't have fathers. Now, let's get into this other thing about Black fathers, and I'm going to get into more detail. However, I want to talk about something else real quick. When we talk about not just having a father in the home, we're talking involvement. One of the things we know is that, yeah, you can have a father in the home, but if they're not active, if they're not involved, then, you know, what good is that? So one of the things in the research that I've done and the studies that our government has done, even though they push a different narrative, compared to white fathers and Hispanic fathers across the board, and I'm going to break it down what I mean by across the board. Not only, not all of our families, more of our families have a father in the home, but when we're talking about father involvement in various aspects, African American or Black fathers are more involved with their children and more involved in the raising process, more involved in their children's activities, more involved in actually participating in household chores, um, children's activities, playing with kids, and all those things are more involved than whites and Hispanics. Now, we could talk about cultural context and all of those things. However, we don't talk about cultural context when we push this narrative or push this picture that Black men are not involved in their kids' lives. So let me pull some numbers up for you real quick. And what I mean by numbers, I'm just going to talk about the different areas that when they did this research, I'm going to talk about the different areas that we're talking about. So we're talking about engagement in direct interaction with children, including taking care of them, playing with them, and teaching a child. So when we're talking about actual rearing a kid, Black fathers are more involved in that process. Accessibility, availability. Black fathers are more available than their counterparts. Responsibility for taking care of a child, making plans, arrangements. Black fathers are more involved in that process. And when we talk about also economics and support, believe it or not. So one of the things when we're talking about Black fatherhood, we have this picture. It's sort of this picture and this narrative that has been pushed. For one, saying that Black fathers are not in the home. We have this term called deadbeat dads, and that a lot of our families are fatherless, when the fact of the matter is more of our families have fathers in the home. Think about that. Why is this important to talk about when we talk about a series on fatherhood? Here's the thing, and especially in this social climate, especially in when we're talking about moving forward as a community socially, and we're talking about moving forward when we talk about building wealth and all of these things in terms of fatherhood, the importance of it. One of the things when we look at the different areas of not only a boy's life, but the family in and of itself, the role of the father, the role of the male in the house, whether he's biological or not, the role of a father who's not in the family, oftentimes gets negated or pushed away for the sake of two parents who, for whatever reason, don't get along. One of the first things we often think about and we often talk about, we believe for some reason, or even if we don't believe it, we push this agenda that pushes the male aside. Think about that. So, and what do I mean by that? How often do we see, even when we talk about in the court system, when we talk about child custody, when we talk about all of these things, how most black fathers are against the system and the people pushing against them. The problem is the kid is in the middle of all of those things. And then now a lot of our boys grow up thinking that their fathers don't care. But the fact of the matter is, when we're talking about black fathers, we are more involved and the numbers are there to prove it. So why would we push away? Why would we push this narrative that black fathers, or we talk about these, you know, the deadbeats, and that becomes our narrative? When the fact of the matter is, more black men want to be fathers. It's a part of who we it's a part of who we are. But not only systematically have black fathers been pushed out of the family, but we've done it to ourselves. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just look at a lot of the families that we know. Not all. I don't want to say that all of our families, but when you look at the narrative of black fathers, how often as a whole, how often or when was the last time you heard black fathers in a global context being positive? The narrative is generally, or the assumption is that the father is not in the home and doesn't want to be in the home. And that's just simply not true. And then when we talk about involvement with our kids, when you look at TV, when you look at commercials, when you look at social media, how often do you see images of black fathers engaged with the family? You almost never see it because they push this narrative that black men are not involved in their families. And that's simply not true. As a young father, and my kids can attest to this, I can attest to my brother, who's also a father, and I can attest to all the fathers in my family and all the fathers in my circle of how involved we are with our kids. When I'm talking school events, I'm talking at the house activities, playing, reading, teaching. The fact of the matter is that when given the chance, black men want to be fathers. Black men are good fathers. But for some reason, we focus on the ones that, for whatever reason, may or may not want to be fathers. And then oftentimes, because of money and because of hate and because of resentment and all these other things, the fathers who want to be involved, we push them away. Think about that. And so This isn't to say that other nationalities, particularly Hispanic, and when they do these researches, they often do Black, Hispanic, or and white. This isn't to say that there's not good fathers across the board, but the narrative isn't the fact that Black men are more involved in their families than not, and that more Black families have fathers in them than not. Just like they would have you to believe that there are more Black people on welfare when the fact is that there's more white people on welfare. So one of the things that people, my undergrad was sociology, and I did a lot of research on different, social aspects and all these things, just because I wanted to know. And oftentimes I did, um, social context, racial context, and that sort of thing. The fact of the matter is, when people or the media need to push a narrative, and so why is this more important in this context, in this social climate? Because for one, we need to get better as a family. We need to give the man and the father its proper place in the family. But as we begin to move forward socially and globally, we need to stop as Black people pushing these negative narratives about us. We need to stop what they call infighting. And the problem is, we do a lot of infighting in the family, and the kids suffer. And the fact of the matter is, when we talking about Black boys and fathers, when you rob a kid, particularly a boy, of his opportunity to engage and nurture a relationship with his father, you in essence are taking a piece of them. And then we wonder why we see the things that we see as these kids get older. So when we talk about fatherhood, particularly Black fatherhood, let's stop lying and let's change the narrative. The narrative is that there's more Black fathers in the home, and even the ones that aren't in the home want to be fathers and want to be involved. And when we are involved, our kids turn out better. I see a lot of memes on, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or what is it called? What's the other one? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, of women. They put these memes up, and how could I put it? Basically, putting these memes up saying, I don't need a man. That's in the gist of it. That's what it means. I don't need a man, and all that other stuff. Okay, that's fine. You probably don't. But here's the thing. Here's why I mentioned that. That lets me know that when I see this, oh, I could be, I could do by myself. I could get this by myself. I can whatever. That lets me know that a lot of people do not understand the psyche of men. Here's the thing. We have gotten so far away from what God intended. We have gotten so far away from what's nature, that not only have we pushed the man out of the family, we pushed the importance of men's and the men's role out of the family and out of relationship. And then we wonder why, as a people, we suffer. God structured and made men a certain way. God structured and made women a certain way. And he made and structured the family a certain way. Now, I'm not trying to get in all to the LBGTQ and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that gay and lesbian and people can't raise kids. That's not my business. But what I'm saying is that by nature, men And when it comes to our psyche, having kids, raising kids, building a legacy, being able to influence another human being that we had a part in creating is a part of what makes us men. And when you take that away, and then you understand why we struggle, and what I mean by struggle, with anger, with emotional problems, with fighting with you, the baby mama. I ain't talking about the kid's mother. I'm talking the baby mama. There's a difference between a kid's mother and a baby mama. Get into that later. But when you take that away, and we're talking that was stripped away during the middle passage, and the moment we reached these shores, you took a part of us. You took away a big part of the male spirit by not allowing us to be fathers and not allowing us to raise our families. And then wonder why historically and generationally Black men struggle, because God created us, a part of our psyche, a part of us, what makes us feel good about ourselves is to be able to create a human being and raise it and influence it. Just like the little boy lives vicariously through me and looks up to me, I live vicariously through him. And that's a reminder of my accomplishment, my influence. That's how I live on. But oftentimes, that's ripped away. But the true fact of the matter is that most, if not all, Black men want to be fathers. And when allowed, we're good fathers. Because by nature, historically, we are more nurturing. We are more involved. We want to connect. So what I'm asking and what I'm suggesting is let's stop pushing this myth that Black men don't want to be in the family and that Black men aren't fathers or don't want to be fathers. And in fact, more Black families have fathers in them. And when it comes to socially, we're more involved, even at a smaller level, from actually raising the kid, being involved in their day-to-day life, not just going to work and here's the money that you raise the kid. No, we're actually involved in their lives. I used to comb my daughter's hair. I used to dress them. I've been to every single parent-teacher conference. If they're involved in something, I'm there. Understand, that's a part of what makes me be a man. It's the way God built us. And so here's the thing, whether you got girls or boys, when you block a father from being involved in their kid's life, when you block it, you are destroying a piece of your son. You are destroying a piece of your daughter. Because when we talk about how do I know who I am, the first place we look as kids is to our parents. Those are our first teachers. That's the first person who's telling me who I am. Think about that for a minute. So, fatherhood, Black fatherhood. So, as an introduction to this 4-part series, one of the things I thought it was important to make sure that we dispel this myth that Black men are not in the home. Here's the thing. We as Black men have been systematically pushed out of the family. And I hate to say it, but we as a people have bought into it We as a people have bought into it, and we've pushed that narrative. We've pushed it ourselves. Then you add in child support, then you add in all this other stuff. So because I need to win and I want this and I want that, and then we use the kids as pawns. Remember, the part of the male psyche is to be a father, to recreate himself. And when you take that away, you are taking away a piece of that child and you are damaging the soul of that man. Think about that. So that's my introduction to this 4-part series in terms of when we talk about dispelling the myth of Black fathers. I could go into a lot more detail, but I don't want to bog you down, and I'll cover some more of that. However, the first thing I need you to understand is that not only are we good fathers, we're present fathers. We're not absent. Are there fathers that are absent? Sure. It's not what I'm talking about. But I think we need to begin to push the narrative. Do we have fathers in prison? Sure. Do we have fathers that are absent? Absolutely. Do we have fathers that are uninvolved? Absolutely. But as a whole and as a people, we have pushed this narrative that we think it is more commonplace to be fatherless when more of our kids have fathers. And I think it's time that we stop being so politically correct, that we get back to the nature and the structure of the family as God intended it. And allow men to take his rightful place and rightful role in the family and in the child's life as God intended. Think about that. This has been Indestructible Soul, introduction to a 4-part series on fatherhood, Black fatherhood. I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for participating. And don't forget to get out there and vote. Your vote counts. Your vote matters. And we out. Thank you and good night.